But speaking of things that are a bit more jointed,
Yes.
Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
And I did intentionally choose the Japanese cover when I found it because it amused me that that existed.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's a good cover. That's a good poster. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically the American one just with Japanese text.
Mm.
So, Daniel, we observed last week that we had a rarity here, a
Mhm.
classic movie that you had seen, or excuse me, that I had seen that you had not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So mark it on your calendars, folks, because it doesn't happen very often.
Now, usually he's the one bringing classics of the past to me,
Mm.
where we happen to have seen the same things. But
Yeah.
um, this is an interesting movie because it Beetlejuice can you can have a very different outlook on Beetlejuice depending on what your first exposure to it was. Because Daniel, did you ever watch the Beetlejuice cartoon?
Bits and pieces of it. I don't remember it very well. I think I would probably watch it like if it came on before Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I want to say that I caught it on reruns on Nickelodeon. Um, I can't say that it left too strong of an impression on me, except that both times I've seen this movie, I've been a little bit startled as to who the real main characters are.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because like for the cartoon, the main characters were, was it Lydia? Yeah,
Yeah.
Lydia and Beetlejuice, and they would have adventures, but they really aren't in this movie nearly as much as the real main characters.
Yeah. When I was watching this, I'm like, the plot reminded me a bit of Hellraiser, um, and allow me to explain. And that movie is about a woman who's she's married to a guy, but she was having an affair with the guy's brother, and the brother is like hiding up in their attic, and his he because he's hiding from the Cenobites, and the Cenobites are not really that's Pinhead was one of them, and they're not in that movie very much, and they're not even and they're kind of like secondary villains, and that's kind of where I got made the connection there with the between those two movies, because like you're saying, Beetlejuice isn't in it that much, and
Which might be to his benefit, but we'll talk about that later.
yeah. But yeah, the focus of the movie is mainly on the couple, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis,
Adam and Barbara, respectively.
Adam and Barbara. Yeah, um,
Which I will say first off, it was strange seeing Adam Baldwin, Alec Baldwin that young and skinny.
yeah, it was. Yeah, um, and I think this movie was. I mean, it was before he was even really a big name star. I don't think people really knew who he was back then, or he was just getting to that point.
This couldn't have this couldn't have hurt his movie career. Now he was this was 1987, right? Yeah,
88,
1988. 88.
88.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this was a year before Batman came out, which
Right.
just give a quick plug. Midnight's Edge has an interesting retrospective on this movie and the road it took for us to get to the sequel.
Yeah.
Uh, it at one point it passed through the hands of the creator of, or at least the director of the Freddy Krueger movies before ended up going back to Tim Burton. I think that Michael Keaton just seemed to have an early career where nobody thought he could do anything.
Yeah.
I think I remember there being like some question about if he was right for the character.
Yeah. Well, they were definitely saying that when he was cast as Batman.
Yeah,
Um,
that's just so funny.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, up to that point, I mean, he had done like Mr. Mom,
Yeah,
uh, Gung Ho. Oh, what was that movie with him and Henry Winkler where they're in a they're working at a funeral home.
yeah, I don't know the name of that one.
Yeah, but yeah, he was mainly just doing all these like kind of goofy comedies. And then yeah, then he gets this movie, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, so I guess so now I think we've set the stage a bit. All right, so it occurs to me that neither of us had any compunction whatsoever about completely spoiling Horizon and American Saga because I think we both came away with that with a negative opinion and wanted to talk about why we had a negative opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
But this movie, on the other hand, if you've somehow not seen it, I think I want to preserve your ability to go in and enjoy it before we start talking broad details.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you might go, DB, what kind of egomaniac are you where you assume that you're going to be somebody's introduction to Beetlejuice? Like, I don't know, man. I think that this show is proof that somebody can go through life a long ways and then start picking up on movies that everybody else had watched decades ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hadn't seen it until last weekend, so
Exactly.
yeah.
So, in broad strokes, in a small town in New England, Adam and Barbara, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are living a happy not sing,
Uh,
well,
Dink.
dink lifetime. Yeah,
Yeah,
dual or actually we don't know that they had dual income. But either ways,
yeah,
they they're a young happy couple. They're talking about having a kid, and then they have a car crash. And what's interesting about the car, like they did a very good job of setting up that they died and didn't realize it.
yeah, yeah. They die, and then they go back to their house, but everything in their house is different, and it's it's not quite right. And then they find a book called what was the title of it?
Like it was something like a guide for the recently departed or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. And they quickly realize, but then they quickly realize that they are in fact dead. And they get they're reading through the book, and it just doesn't make any sense to them
Yeah, it's
because
described as reading like a repair manual.
right. And so then as they're still in their house, another family buys their house and moves in. They're from New York, and it's I can't remember the dad's name, but it's the principal from Ferris Bueller, who's a real scumbag in real
Catherine
life.
O'Hara.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Catherine O'Hara, yeah, she's Catherine O'Hara is this like postmodern sculpture artist, and she's typical New York artsy type, you know.
Right. She thinks that she's great. She is in fact not.
No, yeah, yeah. You see her, yeah. You look at her sculptures, and it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. And they have a daughter, Lydia, who's played by Winona Ryder, kind of channeling Wednesday Adams.
Yeah, I did keep thinking about how it's like in the late '80s, early '90s. There was this making fun of horror aesthetic that a lot of movies and TV shows had.
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah, I think they were trying to do something different with the genre. They're trying to do the horror comedy thing. Although, according to Joe Bob Briggs, the key to a good horror comedy is that it has to be 80% horror and 20% comedy. Because if you do it the other way, you're trying to make a cult movie before it's actually a cult movie.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
Hmm.
Now let's see here. So it's basically the two newly deads, haha,
Mhm.
trying to scare these people out of their house, even though they can't. Most of them can't see them. Lydia can because she's a goth.
Yeah. Yeah, and they even mentioned in the book that most humans don't want to see them, or not that they can't see them, or it's just they choose not to, or something like that. Um,
Yeah. So just talking like from a oh yeah. So it occurs to me our summary has left out the title character because he's actually
yeah,
again he's not in the movie very much. It's unique to have a movie titled after the villain like
you're
this.
right. Yeah, Yeah, he pops up every now and then. Like the first time you see him is in this TV commercial where it's just kind of like one of those regional TV commercials that you see for like some car dealership or
Uh, Wow, Daniel, did you know that the Critique Corner podcast is streaming right now?
Oh.
Thanks, YouTube, for the timely notification.
Yes, 1 hour into the freaking stream.
Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah, like you said, like just a cheap local commercial.
yeah,
Uh, and Michael Keaton had so much fun here. You can just tell.
yeah. Yeah, and then so then they finally Adam and what was her name?
Barbara.
Barbara. Yeah, Adam and Barbara finally decide to meet Beetlejuice and to try to ask for his help in getting rid of the new owners of their house. But Beetlejuice is weird.
Yes. He's like an R-rated Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. There's even an F bomb in there, and I'm like, whoa, this movie's PG.
Yeah, 1988 was built different, man.
Yeah, yeah,
But so yeah, so that there's your premise. These two people are trying to scare the living out of their house.
mhm,
Uh, they're dealing with the idiosyncrasies of their new neighbors, and they've introduced this chaotic element into things to try to drive them out.
mhm.
So, non-spoiler thoughts. I think the strongest part of this movie, well, let's hear. Strongest part of this movie is definitely the visual design.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Tim Burton has, or either Tim Burton or whoever did his set designs back in the day, had a very particular style. And if
yeah,
you had seen Nightmare Before Christmas before seeing this, you'll keep going, oh, okay, I know that style.
yeah. Well, even his Batman movies have that kind of unique look to them.
Yeah.
Um,
Right, just that kind of lost a little bit of it because it had to conform to something like reality. But
yeah,
like this thing over here where you have this bird thing with a comb on the back.
yeah,
That's actually one of the characters who has stretched their skin out to try to look horrifying.
yeah,
So yeah, that was kind of unique.
yeah, and yeah. There's a lot of really great claymation and stop motion in there, like the giant worm that you see in the whatever that desert area that they're in.
Apparently, it's on Saturn somehow? Question mark.
Saturn, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like, and the movie is not afraid to do something wacky and off the wall just for its own sake. So it's very refreshing that way.
yeah,
It also has a maybe this might be a case where watching Horizon over 2 days positively colored my opinions. I think this
yeah.
thing is a brisk 92 minutes.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it doesn't overstay its welcome. Yeah,
No, and you can see why an executive at the time would go, "We need to milk this for all it's worth. We need an animated show."
yeah. Merchandising, where the real money from the movie's made.
Yeah, so I would say maybe the smallest children shouldn't watch this, but I
Hmm.
would think that at least 10 and up would be good.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
uh, Now there is a bit where there's like a fantasy brothel
Oh yeah,
uh, that you might have to answer some awkward questions about if you have a kid around.
yeah,
But aside from that, it's just kind of vaguely creepy, but it's like good wins in the end, is
yes,
which I
yeah,
think is like one of the defining features of whether something is suitable for smallest children or not.
yeah, yeah.
Um, all right, let's get into some spoiler thoughts. And I don't necessarily think we need to go blow by blow with the plot, more just like what are things that you would want to highlight and pick apart a little bit that you don't necessarily want somebody to be ruined on before they watch the movie.
Uh, well, I will say, like, Lydia's relationship with Adam and Barbara, I thought was really interesting. Because she's the goth girl who clearly doesn't fit in with her own mother and father, but the two of them seem to get her. You know, um, and the other thing I really liked was the whole use with Adam's got this miniature of the town in the
Mhm.
attic, and that's kind of used as like the backdrop, kind of like the backdrop of a lot of stuff. That's where Beetlejuice is hanging out.
Yeah, he just shrunk himself down, and when he wants to talk with somebody, he shrinks them down. And they made an excellent set to just replicate the look of this miniature
Yeah,
because
yeah,
like the grass is some sort of it's like a yoga like a stiff golf mat or yoga mat or something,
yeah, yeah, and
and they have
yeah,
they've blown it up to have like a human sized version of that for those shots.
right, yeah. Um, well, I will say, like Beetlejuice gets really, he can get a little raunchy at times.
Yeah.
Like there's they ask him like, "Well, can you be scary?" He's like, "Oh, can I be scary?" What? Oh, okay.
The other thing is that he does kind of like, given his perversions, the whole Freddy Krueger connection does seem kind of fitting.
Mhm.
Just like a kid-friendly version of that. That's not quite as murderous.
Yeah, and he definitely has the quips and one-liners like Freddy Krueger.
What I think is interesting is that I don't think they ever outright say that he's out to necessarily kill the humans. He's just trying to drive them out.
Yeah, but his way of doing it is just really twisted.
Yeah. Other things that that so there are some things that have stuck in my mind as being part of Beetlejuice that really aren't, like the whole shrunken head guy. I
Yeah,
I think that there was more than one of them in the cartoon, and it's actually a very small part of the movie here.
yeah, yeah, and uh, I will say the probably the creepiest part of it for me was like when Beetlejuice tries to marry Lydia. It's like, okay, she's like 14 or 15 years old.
At best.
Yeah. Like, okay.
Yeah. Um, and I will say that I get you get the feeling there's just a lot of things in here that either Tim Burton found appealing or the screenwriter found appealing. Like they
Mhm.
have a lot of old mambo music that just
Yeah.
comes up as a recurring element.
Yeah, yeah, the whole Deo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole sequence in there. You pointed out too the one guy looked like he was trying really hard not to crack up and
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. During that scene, there was like one bit where Glenn Shattuck's playing Otho, the flamboyant interior decorator.
Yeah.
He like one point he was clearly smirking in the middle of this long dance sequence where Beetlejuice like possesses everybody and forces them to dance along with "Ayo, Deo,
Deo.
daylight come man."
Yeah. Um, what was the actor's name again?
Glenn Shattuck's.
Glenn Shaddix. I recognized his voice uh,
That's
when he
well,
started talking. I think
oh,
he's done a lot of voiceover stuff.
he was the mayor in Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
He was in the 2001 version of Planet of the Apes.
Mm, mm,
Let's just zip through here. Kingdom. Oh, okay. I was a little surprised that he was in Kingdom Hearts 2 until I saw he was as the mayor of Halloween Town, so that tracks.
yeah. Yeah.
He was a couple of characters in the Teen Titans cartoon, though it was the fifth season I didn't really watch.
Yeah.
Um, he was in Justice League Unlimited as Steven Mandragora, but that's not a character I recognize the name of. He's been Clue Master in the Batman, so he's been
Okay.
around. There's just a lot of small voices.
Yeah. I recognize that he has a very distinct, like, deep
Hmm.
voice. So that was kind of like, oh, think he's been in a few cartoons I've watched. Um,
Huh, he was also the mayor in the TV series Rocket Power. Which, you know what? He actually has a good voice for a kids movie mayor because he sounds deep and like you could kind of think of him as having like a commanding voice, but at the same time he has some ludicrousness to him.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the movie overall, I think, is enjoyable enough. I don't know, not entirely sure why I avoided it for so long. My mother and father may have had a hand in that somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, the thing is, there's a lot of people who this wouldn't be up their alley, but I think this might be like the most approachable one of these horror comedies outside of maybe Adam's Family.
Mm,
And the reason, of course, okay, so for me, I liked this much better than when we watched the Adams Family movie from the 90s. Um,
yeah,
and I think it is just because, so it had a lot of that same sort of humor where it's like bad is good as and good is bad, where, Beetlejuice is like, he sees this mouse as valuable, like, I'll trade this mouse or whatever it was.
yeah. Yeah, and like the scene when Adam and Barbara, when they turn their heads in, the claymation
Mhm.
thing, like pulling his head out and then doing all that, and then their caseworker's like, "Oh, you look great."
Yeah, right. Well, the thing is like that was sparing. Like the main point of view characters were still um, this normal subdued couple who just were in this an odd situation.
Yeah,
Um, and maybe that's why I liked it better, was just because it did have that grounding of having these two characters. At the same time, I can see why, as memory serves, they were completely absent from the cartoon version because they get in the way of Lydia and Beetlejuice having wacky adventures.
yeah, yeah. Well, in a story like this, you kind of have to have somebody from the outside with who has some normalcy to kind of just point out the absurdity of everything that's going on around them.
Yep. Yeah. Nope. Definitely agreed.
Yeah.
Visually speaking, again, this was a uh, definitely very imaginative. There are a couple of green screen effects that, at least on HBO Max's stream, were a little bit obvious now, but I'm sure they looked fine on analog.
Yeah. There were a couple of parts that looked a little rough. Yeah. Yeah, especially the parts on Saturn where it's like, yeah, it definitely looks like a green screen there, or blue
Yep.
screen, or whatever they were using.
Or at the end when Beetlejuice gets his head shrunk.
Oh yeah.
Um, there was another thought that I had there in terms of the. Oh yeah, speaking of the shrunken head guys, uh, so Daniel, on Max, are you cheap like me and get the ad-supported version, or do you pay for the full fat version?
Oh, I've got the full fat version.
So for this and Horizon, they were playing a bunch of commercials for Google featuring the Pinhead people, and there were multiples of them, and like there was like their heavy tie-in with Beetlejuice.
Huh.
So uh, I thought that was kind of interesting that this minor element in this 30-year-old movie was seen as something you could hang the hat of a advertising campaign on.
Yeah.
Which my understanding is that this thing was like dominated cable for a few years there.
I seem to recall that. Yeah. Like, yeah, you turn on like you know TBS or you know WGN or something like that, and it would be on there. Yeah.
Yep. And you can see why. It was a hit at the time, and it's the sequel is a hit in theaters today. And
Mm.
I don't know, maybe I'll drag my carcass to a movie theater and watch this. Or well, I just watch the sequel just to see if I agree with the mez I was hearing on Midnight's Edge.
Mm. Yeah. I may just wait till streaming.
That's fair. That's
Hmm.
totally fair.
Yeah.
You know what else is fair? We didn't do a Horizon and American Saga length podcast this week, so I think we've
Yes.
said what we need to say about Beetlejuice. If
Yes, indeed.
if it sounds even remotely up your alley, go watch it now.
Yes, indeed.
You can stream it on Max.
Yeah.